Mindfulness. Welcome everybody. This is a little brief on mindfulness. We can rush through every single day with loads of tasks and things to do. And mindfulness is about us taking a moment to stop and to be present and to appreciate the things around us and to appreciate the experience that we're currently in. We might make the mistake of thinking, well, that sounds a bit faffy. I haven't got time for that. But actually, this is about ourselves being present. And actually, if we're present in our daily work, then I can guarantee that it's 200% better than it would normally be. Becoming more aware, though, is crucial to everybody's mindset and mental well-being. In fact, by doing this, it can actually then prevent further complications such as depression and anxiety. So, mindfulness might seem to be a bit of a fad and something that maybe you don't have to do, shouldn't do, haven't got time to do. Just take a moment to think about how many times you've been unmindful. Who drove to work this morning and actually can't really remember how you got there because you're in automatic mode? Who makes decisions sometimes and then is thinking about the next thing? How many times do you actually sit in your office and take a moment to be present, to hear what's going on around you, or walk around the school and really take in that moment? I think if we're all honest with each other, probably not very many of us, very much of the time. So this is a little bit about why it's important to be mindful, some of the science around being mindful, and then finishing with an example of how you can try to build mindfulness into your day. How many of us have really felt like this? I know, hands up, I'll certainly say, I felt some days like putting a bucket over my head. Here is a very short excerpt from a talk that Daniel Goleman gave. He's a very experienced writer in emotional intelligence and emotional literacy.
I'm very pleased to be here, and thank you for that introduction. Tonight, this evening, I'd like to call your attention to attention. And let me begin with a story. It's about a classic experiment in social psychology. It was done many years ago at the Princeton Theological Seminary with divinity students. Each student was told that they're going to give a practice sermon. They'd receive a topic to prepare, and then they go to another building and give the sermon to be evaluated. Half of the students were given the parable of the Good Samaritan as their topic, the man who stopped to help the stranger in need by the side of the road. The other half were given random Bible topics. As each divinity student went over to the other building to give their sermon, they passed a man who was bent over and moaning in pain. The interesting question is, did they stop to help? The more interesting question is, did it matter if they're pondering the parable of the Good Samaritan? What do you think? Didn't matter. Made no difference at all. What mattered was how much time pressure people felt they were under. And this is more or less the story of our lives. There's a spectrum that runs from noticing the other person, to tuning into the other person, to empathizing and understanding what's going on with them. And then if they're in need and there's something that we can do, compassion and maybe helping them. But if we never notice in the first place, we never go down that road. And this is the problem with attention today. It's under siege.
Not only is our attention under siege, but then because we're not being as mindful as we could be, our brains don't react in the same way. In fact, there is some research available that suggests in children that the cortex development in their brains is actually changing and actually getting smaller. Some people refer to this due to the devices and the way that children are growing up now. But the consequence of that means that their ability to emotionally regulate, to process emotion and respond in the right way is actually changing. There are many, many different people doing research out there, but here's an example of Harvard University.
Mindfulness is really the practice of being aware of what's going on in the moment. Some people add, without judging it, so just really observing. And then the practice of meditation is a more, kind of structured, disciplined practice, often with some kind of an anchor where you're resting attention, the breath, a word, something like that.
In some specific conditions, the evidence is a little bit stronger on the effects of mindfulness meditation, and those are depression, anxiety, and chronic pain. The idea behind mindfulness-based cognitive therapy is that by training people in mindfulness meditation, we increase their capacity for interoception and for being able to listen to their body, so to speak, and to drop in the body. And that will actually help them disengage from this cognitive rumination with negative thoughts about the self. We're testing this hypothesis in the brain by looking at the brain networks that are involved and having people do specific tasks in the scanner to test if they engage in these tasks differently after having received the mindfulness training. The purpose of this research is to find out the mechanisms of mindfulness training in the brain, and from that information, hopefully make some changes to the intervention that take those mechanisms into account. For example, doing more of certain types of practices if we think these are the ones that are key, and perhaps doing less of other aspects of the mindfulness training if science finds that these elements don't actually have so much of an impact.
I think you kind of have this daily practice so that as you go about your day, you're able to be mindful and present, or notice when you're not, because nobody does it 100%.
The human brain is a profoundly complex organ. 90% of its activity occurs beneath conscious awareness, which means that even though we assume that we have some control of how we think, feel, and behave, modern science suggests it's not so simple. The concept of neuroplasticity is a new and exciting area of science. It highlights that our brain is constantly being reshaped throughout our lives by both our experiences and our thoughts. We now know that it is the focus of our awareness that determines which brain networks are strengthened and which are weakened or lost. That means that when we get caught up in cycles of worry or irritability, these are the networks within the brain that become stronger. So the more we worry, the better we become at worrying. However, on the other side of this, if we practice being calm, clear and focused, we can strengthen these networks too. As humans, our brain differs from other animals. This is mostly due to the front areas of the brain called the frontal lobes, often called the new brain, as it was the last to develop in our evolution. When well developed, this part of our brain helps us to manage our strong emotions and respond with flexibility, even when we feel overwhelmed. It also helps us to tune into the feelings of others with empathy and insight. When we feel worried, distracted, or stuck on achieving goals, our brain function is more strongly dominated by our old brain, which has a part called the amygdala. The amygdala manages the powerful fight and flight response, which switches on when we feel stressed or anxious and releases hormones and chemicals such as cortisol and adrenaline. That is why stress has such a big impact on us. Mindfulness is a technique that can help us to manage this process more effectively by building our skills of attention, concentration, and a capacity to direct our awareness in a certain way. This all means that we're less likely to be swept up by a strong emotion and the power of the amygdala. It also means we can bring choice to our emotions and our thoughts. In doing so, we're playing an active role in changing the way the structure of our brain develops, in much the same way we can change the shape of our body by doing certain exercises at the gym. When we practice meditation regularly, we build a capacity to become aware of thinking and emotion. As our mind becomes more settled, our nervous system is able to take in more accurate information, and we can access capacities for creativity, flexibility, and lateral thinking, which enable us to manage challenging situations more skillfully. When we build skills of mindfulness, we still experience negative feelings like frustration, disappointment, fear, or irritability. But the research shows that we recover much more quickly. We now know from research into brain development that regular meditation and mindfulness practice reduces the size of the amygdala, reduces levels of stress hormones, and strengthens connections to the frontal lobe.
Taking the time out to do a bit of research around this is really important. So if you do get a moment, please look into it. But the bottom line is that it's not a faff, it's not a fad. Actually, training our brains to be able to get the best out of them, to be able to emotionally regulate, means that we can perform better in our jobs, means that we can be more present in our everyday life. The science is out there. How our brains develop, how our brains respond, need to be trained. Somebody once said to me it was a little bit like going in the gym. If you want to tone your body, you have to do certain things in a gym. And your mind is no different. Your mind is that muscle that needs to be trained. So, looking at ways that we can be more mindful. Simple ways, easy ways, and very quick ways that we can put those into our day to mean that we can become more present, to mean that we can emotionally regulate, not respond, react, and be able to be processing and take time for pause. This is surely going to mean that we're all better every day at what we do. But more importantly as well, that we'll feel better every day in what we do. Another reason to be mindful for me is that it can help control your weight, which means that I can always get in my trousers. There are so many reasons why people should be mindful. And I hope you can see from this that it's not for some people and not for others, that actually we all should try and be mindful. In fact, there are also health reasons why we should be mindful. It has been known to be used as a cognitive behaviour therapy for controlling pain and can have significant positive effects on your heart and your body. Before we move into exercising in a mindful way, here are some tips. Approach every day with things with curiosity and savour those moments. Try to take a moment to pause and just look around you. Sometimes it's hard to tolerate things and to forgive them. So try to practice forgiveness and showing gratitude for things around you. That might sound a little bit strange. You might be thinking, well, I'm always grateful. I always share that. But actually stop for a moment now and think about, do you really? When you walk around school, when you're in your classroom, when you're in your office, when you're in the staff room, do you stop and look around you and think about the things we have around us? Do you practice compassion? Do you make peace with imperfections? Most of the time, the teachers that I've met and the leaders that I've met are people who want to do things in the most perfect way. And one of the things that we struggle with is not being perfect. Have a think about whether that relates to you. The other part is embracing and trusting. Trusting each other and trusting that actually we need to stop. So how? Well, here's a very simple way that you could start to apply it.
Apple, a mindful response to thoughts from getselfhelp.co.uk. Apple, acknowledge, pause, pull back, let go, explore. Acknowledge and notice the thought or feeling as it comes up. Pause and breathe. Pull back. Don't believe everything you think. Thoughts are not facts. Let go the thought or feeling. Explore the present moment and choose your focus. Apple, acknowledge, pause, pull back, let go, explore.
There are many quick and simple ways that we can apply being mindful every day into our lives. YouTube has a wealth of resources from 1 minute up to 25 that you could use. Good luck with this. I hope it helps.